I'm Fred. And I'm also Fred.
And we're going for a drive.
How that sounds. Joking aside, that was just a shout out to one of my favorite YouTube channels, the Straight Pipes. Those guys up in Canada know what they're doing, and I have a blast watching them. So I just wanted to see if I can make some sort of an intro like that. Anyway, so the internet's a funny thing. The way that I film, I tend to film fairly far in advance, and I tend to build up a backlog. And so it's actually been quite a while since I've filmed an outright video where I'm driving. So in that time, you can see my hair has gotten a bit longer, and I've been pretty much at home. It's been fairly quiet, you know, as it probably is for most people. But we have a really rare, nice day here in December. It is 49 degrees. All the snow has melted that we had. And we're like mid-December right now. It's December 13th. And I figured, why not go out before we hit the darkness. Hit the darkness. That'd be a good name for a band. I figured we'd go out and take a drive. So let's see what kind of mischief we can get into. Ooh, some good crackles on the downshifts. All right, so we're headed over towards kind of the Newburyport area. I'm going to go along the Merrimack River, which is kind of one of my favorite routes. I actually haven't been over here in a while. I had been riding the Ducati a fair bit, kind of at the end of the season. Once I put the Corvette away, I thought, well, hey, the bike is much easier to wash, and I can winterize that a little bit quicker. And so I've been riding the Ducati a fair bit up until we got some snow. You can see a little bit here. And once I put the bike away, though, I've kind of been inside the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. It's been a little bit of a bummer. It's kind of that end of the season. You wish you could get out and do more, but the weather's so cold and kind of unforgiving that you don't really want to. And I had the realization the other day that when my wife was like, hey Fred, why don't you just take the Mini out? And I was like, I don't know why it hadn't occurred to me. The only driving, oh yeah. That was cool. It drifted up onto the road. We'll launch in sport mode. So anyway, as you can tell, we're kind of in the midst of early winter. There's not any snow on the ground at this point, but it definitely has been colder out. It's been around 30 pretty much for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So I got a little derailed by those UTVs, but wow, look at this guy. He's straddling the line in his Prius. But I had this great realization when my wife mentioned it, that the Mini is an all-season car. It's not a car that, I can only drive in the summer. It's not a car that, needs to be kind of babied. It's something that I bought it for the purpose of driving it. I commuted in the winter last year with it. And so having this as a way for me to get out and drive, even if it's not so warm out, crank up the heated seats, turn on the heat, have the skylights open so that I can get some light. It's not so bad. So I figured I'd take the Mini out and go for a little drive with the daylight we have. So my favorite season is summer, and I mean, driving and everything aside, I just like the warm weather. I like you can have your windows open, both in the car and at home. I like grilling. Grilling's my favorite hobby. I actually like it better than just about anything. And summer is the perfect time. Spring into summer, especially once you get into the 70s, is just fantastic. But there's a lot to be said for having some seasons. I don't know if I would be totally happy living in a place that has no seasons, or it's just always hot and always perfect weather. I mean, I feel like it would take a long time for me to get tired of that. But eventually, you may think, oh man, I wish I just had a little variety. And New England certainly gives that to you. In a general week, the last couple weeks, we've had 60 degrees and sunny. I went out motorcycling. We had 4 inches of snow the next day. It then rained and melted half the snow, and then it iced on top of it, and then it was 40 again, so things were starting to melt. And that was in a 5-day span. So it's kind of crazy that it certainly fluctuates. It's a little bit wilder and more variable than I remember as a kid growing up. Though as a kid, I wasn't really concerned with the weather forecast. I was much more interested in, like, is there snow and is there a snow day? But then even once all the leaves fall off the trees and it gets colder out, there's still this kind of pristine beauty about New England. I don't know if other places are quite like this. I've only ever lived really in New England, a little bit in the Midwest. So I don't know how the rest of the country is, but oh, there's some buffaloes. Oh yeah. Nice, they looked happy. But there is just this kind of serene beauty to driving on these kind of back roads, kind of near the coast, but not right on the water. You get all the winding roads, you still get the farmland, and just pretty cool. So we're gonna go on a little different road. Usually I turn left at this intersection right here, and that's kind of a fun little blast along the river. Nice winding road and a little bit quicker pace. But I'm gonna cross the river and we're gonna go on the other side, and it's definitely slower. I think the speed limit's like 20-25 miles an hour, but it is right on the water, and it's beautiful. So we'll see how that looks. We'll see how things are. There's like mist coming off the river right now. Probably a mix of the cold water and then the unseasonably warm air. So with the wet roads, the light car, and a heavy throttle foot, you end up tripping the stability traction control pretty frequently. This car, certainly with as light as it is, it doesn't get the power to the ground in a hurry when it's really wet. And so I've been kind of laughing to myself as I drive along, because even just like a little blip of the throttle, and it's pretty easy to get the light to go off, but not bad. And it doesn't feel like the car is having trouble to get, steering and handling. It's just you can't accelerate quite as hard as you used to. So hopefully you can see off here on the left, just this beautiful spot. So this is the Merrimack River. We're about probably like 6 miles outside of Newburyport, and kind of headed like east, maybe a little southeast to get to the coast. But what a nice spot. Just beautiful along here. My wife and I used to have a boat. We had a 16-foot Boston whaler, and this is the river that we would launch on in order to get over to the ocean. Seeing it from the water, it's so different from seeing it from land. And then even either shore, you're seeing a completely different view. So it's just neat to see it in a variety of ways. It's a really beautiful kind of section of water. And it's funny, along here, and especially right now, you wouldn't really realize it, but in the summer, this is pretty crowded. There's lots of boat traffic, there's people going out fishing, and there's people on jet skis. And when you get a little bit further on, you're just outside Newburyport, and there's actually hundreds, if not thousands, of boats that moor in that harbor. And so it's neat to see it when it's totally open and quiet right now. Definitely pretty cool. Look at this. I feel like that's my catchphrase. Look at this. I feel like in all my videos when I'm like seeing something cool, it's look at this, look at this. Get in your lane, buddy. Don't look too much at this. One interesting thing about the Merrimack River, from about Lawrence, Mass, all the way over to the coast where it empties into the ocean in Newburyport, is that it's a tidal river. And so what happens is when the ocean goes up and down, this river has varying amounts of back pressure from the tide kind of pushing in on the water or going out. And so you actually end up where this river has a tide. And I know when we were launching our boat, we used to launch in Haverhill, you actually had to time when you were going to go. And so if it was super low tide, you couldn't launch, because you'd get to the end of the boat ramp and then you'd have 50 feet of dirt before you got to where there was a little bit of water flowing through. And then at high tide, you'd have almost no ramp visible at all. It would be almost right up to the parking lot. And so you had to kind of pick and choose when you came along. One other important aspect of that is that, New England tends to be rocky. In this area, border with New Hampshire and Mass, there's lots of rocks, lots of ledge. And so these rivers are not deep. They're not, fully smooth on the bottom. There's lots and lots of ledge and rock that you need to avoid. And so I would have like a GPS app on my phone and use that to navigate. And then you also have to follow the channel buoys so that you're avoiding ledges. And there were spots where it might only have been 25, 30 feet wide in between two buoys, and everything on either side was rock. And especially at half tide, where the water's not all the way up, you would actually have rocks that would be like just under the surface or poking along, and you'd see the surface of the water with the current. You'd actually see the water rippling as it's coming over rocks. And so you had to be really careful. It ended up being a really interesting thing to learn how to navigate on that kind of conditions, and to see, you know, I really have to pay attention to the charts. I went and got my boater's license. New Hampshire requires you to have a boater's license if you're going to drive a boat. And so, you know, we did some of our boating in New Hampshire, some of it in Massachusetts. But I'm glad I took that course. Not every place requires that you have a boater's permit or a boater's license. And that went over all of the navigation and what all the different buoys and markers and stuff mean, so that you could actually operate the boat safely. Go figure. So anyway, that's kind of the drive I was planning, but it was just fun to get out and see the river a little bit and just a change of scenery. I mean, honestly, like, I've been in my house like the last 3 or 4 weeks straight. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope this was fun, or at least a little, you know, detour from whatever you're doing on your normal day. And until next time, Fred out.